Hi, I'm Quincas and I'm a synth DIY guy. Today we're taking a look at the Joranalogue Generate 3, which is a through-zero multiphonic signal generator, which is a very fancy name for a very fancy oscillator. This thing does a lot of stuff, so I actually had to write a little outline for this video because there's so much stuff I want to go over. The way I've set up the oscilloscope here, you can see 4 simultaneous outputs of the Generate 3. It has one more, I'll tell you about it in a little bit. But let's look at these first. So the yellow is the core, which is the triangle. This is a triangle core oscillator and it's extremely stable and accurate. And you can see that triangle wave on the bottom of my oscilloscope there, the yellow line. And you can notice that there are 3 other waves that are being generated. The green one on top is called the fundamental. And it's basically a sine wave. Let's listen to it. I'm going to plug it into my mixer here. And it's a pretty good sine wave. It's a little glitchy on the high end. So it's not the cleanest sine wave you'll ever get. That's a consequence of the phase modulation circuit that Joran implemented here. So you can find a cleaner or dirtier sine wave by manually modulating the phase here. I'll talk more about the phase modulation features on this module later. Okay, so that's the sine wave right there. That's too much reverb, man. Now, let's listen to this guy. That's the even wave, which is basically a sawtooth an octave above the sine wave. And as you've probably noticed, I've just manually adjusted the volume of that wave, right? And you can do that for all 3 harmonic waves that are generated after the core triangle. So all of them have bipolar attenuators, right? Attenuverters. And the interesting thing about them is that as I move to the right, you get this rising ramp, right? When I go through the 0 and back down negative, you have now a falling ramp. So that's what is meant by through 0 amplitude modulation. But you can also call it 4-quadrant multiplication or ring modulator, or simply bipolar AM, bipolar amplitude modulation. So there's a million ways you can call this thing. But in the context of this module, we'll call it through 0 amplitude modulation. And that's what it does. Let's move on to the odd wave. So these are the odd harmonics. And again, I can invert the wave. And it's kind of like an MW, 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 MW kind of a wave. And those are the odd harmonics that are being generated after the core triangle here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to substitute the fundamental, the sine wave. We're going to take a look at the other output that I haven't plugged in yet, which is the full output. Now this one, I think I'll need to attenuate it slightly, because when you sum the 3 harmonic waves, you get a little bit louder than the pure harmonic waves one by one. I'm just going to use my patch pal attenuator. Watch my video on it if you haven't yet. So now let's listen to that right here. And I'll bring the volume down so it's not clipping on the oscilloscope. Okay, now if I bring all of the volumes to center here, all the attenuverters, I can get very close to silence or 0 amplitude. It's kind of hard to actually get silence here, but that's not the point. The point is modulating these volumes. It's not meant to be just a normal mixer. Now I can manually create shapes. So for example, if I want just a straight up square, I can mix the fundamental with some of the odd, right? And then I can use the even to tilt it one way or another. And basically I have a square wave right there. Sounds pretty good too. Now if I add more even, play around with these levels, I can find a wide variety of timbres, right? From purer ones with fewer upper harmonics, but still some, so that definitely gives it some character. Now you're probably wondering, wow, that's so cool. Can I CV it? And the answer is yes, you can CV it. There are CV inputs here for the 3 waves that are being generated, the harmonic waves, right? They're called fundamental, even, and odd. So why don't we send some of my filter 8 outputs here. I have the filter 8 acting as a low frequency oscillator, an octature low frequency oscillator. So I get 8 sequential phased sine waves here. So let's first modulate the fundamental. And now the attenuverter becomes an attenuverter for the incoming signal, right? Rather than a manual control. It's very subtle. So let's do it to the even. There you go. Let's make it slower modulation so we can really hear it. Maybe attenuate that input a little bit more so it's more fluid change. Now let's take another output from the filter 8 and use it on the odd ones. Now that's cool. I'm getting this animated wave now. I'm using different outputs here from the filter 8, so they're phased relative to each other. Now I'm going to modulate the fundamental. If I make it faster, you get like a timbral tremolo kind of effect. It's very interesting. It's kind of reminiscent of some wave folding or even filtering. Now you're probably wondering, can I do it in audio rate? And the answer again is yes. I'm gonna flip the filter 8 into audio rate here. And now what we're getting basically is triple ring modulation, right? We're ring modulating the 3 separate harmonic waves from the Generate 3 with separate phased sine waves from the filter 8. And now you can get these kind of cool glassy tones. Now the cool thing about this is that I can tap all 3 outputs into my mixer separately, which is super cool. Now as I do the audio rate modulation, amplitude modulation, bipolar amplitude modulation, you can hear it in stereo. There's definitely kind of a spatiality about it now. If you want to get a more traditional ring modulator sound, then you just leave the fundamental, right? Turn it up. And so usually people associate with ring modulators is the sine to sine wave ring modulation. I like having all of the elements there. Ease back up. Yeah, much more interesting. So this thing is called a through zero multiphonic signal generator for a reason. There's a lot you can give it before it gives you something back. So we've just given it bipolar amplitude modulation on the 3 separate waves, right? Now I'm going to show you the phase modulation. Let's listen to the sine wave, the fundamental, and the core. Now, when I manually move the phase knob right here, you can see that all 3 of the harmonic waves shift relative to the triangle core, right? So the core it's not being phase shifted. It stays stable, which can be really cool when you juxtapose them, right? Now, why don't we give the phase some modulation? There's a phase modulation input right here. Right, and we'll start with low frequencies. And now the phase knob becomes an attenuverter again for the phase. So when you do it slowly, we get sort of a subtle effect. Why don't I turn on the other two waves too? We'll just make them softer. As I make this go faster, it starts sounding like a weird tremolo. Now let me remove the core from the mix. So now we just hear what's getting phase modulated. Let's move the filter rate to audio rate and listen to some of these cool tones. Listen to the wonderful sounds of audio rate phase modulation, which, as far as I know, is the principle behind the old 80s Casio CZ series synthesizers. Let me turn off the upper waves and we'll only hear it with the sine or the fundamental. So it's very similar to FM, right? But in some ways kind of cleaner and more controlled. And of course, manually modulating the amplitude of the phase modulation is also very cool. I wish I had 3 hands right now. Now, let's have a look at the through zero FM, which is the meat and potatoes of this dish. Turn these down for a second. And what is through zero phase modulation, you ask? Maybe you don't know, right? You've heard about it, but you don't know exactly what it is. Well, let's have a look. I have a through zero frequency modulation knob right here. So we'll listen to the sine wave fundamental for now, right? And I can bring the frequency up a little bit so it's more audible. Now this frequency modulation knob right here, again, it's the attenuverter for the through zero frequency modulation input right here, which is normal to positive voltage. So I'm manually modulating that parameter right now by just turning the knob. If you notice, as I get close to the center of the knob, I get close to 0 hertz. So that's part of the deal with through zero frequency modulation. It means that when you get 0 volts will mean 0 hertz. So you're basically stopping the oscillator. Now it's really hard to find the exact spot on the pot that stops it. You still occasionally hear a little click because you're at a very low frequency. Now, as I turn further towards the left, the frequency starts going back up now. So that's what it means by through zero modulation. You go through the 0. When CV hits 0, you get 0 frequency and then back up. You probably noticed something interesting. Look at that saw wave. I'm all the way to the left now. I go through the 0, and now what was a falling ramp is a rising ramp. So you get the inverted shape of the wave. And the same is happening to the odd wave. Right? So look at right here, you see the little smile. That's gonna become a frown when I go through the 0. So let's try that. There it is. We turned the smile upside down. So that's really cool when you start sending it modulation sources, right? So let me send an audio rate sine wave from the filter 8 again to that input. Now let's turn up the attenuverter so that we start actually getting some of that signal. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is through zero frequency modulation. Now for this, see, the sine wave is a little bit glitchy, so I actually prefer to listen to the actual core of the oscillator, the triangle core. Now you have two auxiliary switches over here. Now, if you want to have a little bit different range of timbres and use it musically with the keyboard, you have a little bias switch here that jumps it up an octave. And now you get a little bit more traditional linear FM sounds, right? No longer going through the zero. Now it's worth noting that everything that I'm doing in audio rate here can be done in low frequency too. So the Generate 3 is not just an audio oscillator, it's an amazingly complex LFO as well. I don't know if I'll have time to go through that aspect of it, but you can just imagine that anything I'm doing in audio rate will work in low frequency mode as well. Now if I'm sending audio rate modulation and go to low frequency mode, you also get some interesting results. But let's go back to audio rate here. So the bias switch is really useful. It just brings that initial frequency up higher and you get a different range of possibilities. Let's turn the other ones up a little bit and listen to that stereo linear FM. Cool. Badass, I could do this for days. Now there's an AC switch here that removes any offset that may be coming in along with the signal into the 30 FM. That can help keeping things in tune too, because once you like one of these sounds, you can actually control it with the keyboard in traditionally musical ways, which is one of the advantages of linear FM. Because Expo FM, things just get crazy tuning wise, so it's great for effects, but can't really use it tonally. Speaking of exponential FM, we have exponential FM too. So here's another detail. If you want to use this as a very in tune oscillator, yeah, I've just checked and it's 8 octaves perfectly in tune, you need to leave the FM attenuverter all the way to the right or to the left. Like in the middle position, you might not get perfect 1 volt per octave response. Okay, so that's a good detail to know. Now let's go into exponential FM, and again, exponential FM has its own attenuverter here as well. So every single pot here is an attenuverter, except for the frequency pots, of course. Now I'm doing exponential FM. Exponential doesn't do the through zero. You keep the shape. Let's go to bias up again. Let's go back to audio rate here. So now, audio rate, exponential FM. Let's listen to that with just the core. I almost said cross FMing. That's a good idea. Let me get the full output here and send it back to the filter. Just for fun. Awesome cross modulation between filter 8 and generate 3. Yeah, things are starting to get real interesting. Let's take a look at syncing this oscillator. It has two different sync inputs. A reset, which is a hard sync, and a flip, which is a soft sync. So right now the frequency is slaved to our filter 8, but the timbre will vary according to the generate 3's frequency control up here. Let's hear some more waves now. Odd and even in stereo. Now let's put it in low frequency here. That's interesting too. You can kind of use the generate 3 as an audio processor when you send it by using it in low frequency mode. Now let's try the hard sync. So that's hard sync, reset, and here's soft sync. Sounds super cool. Now look at the soft sync flip input. Alright, now let's play around with multiphonic through zero modulation, right? Like the title says. So I'm gonna plug another oscillator. Right now I'm using the Electro Smith 3340 VCO in the soft sync input. Let's actually move that and move the phase with it, right? There we go. Now take an audio rate sine wave from the filter 8 and we'll give it to the through zero FM here. Bias switch is on, AC switch is on. So that's cool. Now I have different frequencies, different oscillators affecting different parameters. being on phase, controlled by this guy, and through 0 FM by this guy. Let's go back to listening to just the core, rather the fundamental, because the core is not going to reflect any of the phase modulation. So yeah, I'll listen to the fundamental wave right now. We're getting into infinity territory here. There's just no limit to the kinds of timbres and sounds you can get out of this thing. Yeah. And now switching it to low frequency makes them interact in different ways, interesting ways. Alright, back to audio rate. Now let's send it some more modulation. Let's send it some other outputs from filter 8 into some of the ring modulator inputs, or the here fundamental, even, and another one on the odd here. And now we're doing simultaneously AM, FM, and PM, all of them through 0. Now I can take another oscillation and send it to the hard sync, and that should tame things a little bit actually. It'll synchronize the oscillators. So let's take the flip. There we go. Now let's take the soft sync from this other oscillator over here. Okay, so we're back to the blank slate here, and now I want to exemplify some of the more traditional uses one could make of the synthesizer by using a keyboard. And again, that's one of the advantages of linear FM, is that you can keep things in tune even when you create gnarly modulated sounds. So I'll connect the gate for now to one of my punch modules here, but we won't use it yet. I'm just going to use the pitch output from my Arturia key step here. Now let's apply frequency modulation, linear frequency modulation from, what happened here? This cable is shitty. Bye, shitty cable. First, we'll send the same CV to my filter 8, which will be the modulating oscillator. I'll take an output from it into the through 0 FM input here. And as you can see, I start getting these glassy tones, but they tune. That's pretty cool right there. And honestly, even though this is all fully analog, these sounds sound to me kind of digital. And the reason is that these techniques were mostly used by digital synths in the 80s. FM by Yamaha, the X7. Phase modulation, let's send it to phase modulation here. Yeah, it's a little bit brighter, more glassy even. That's the Casio CZ series. Wow, super sweet. Any combination of knob positions here will yield different results, completely different results. So that's phase modulation, and here's through 0 FM. It's a little more subtle. We can turn up some of the other harmonic waves too now. Let's go back to phase again. Let me send another oscillator to the heartsink. I'll take the sine wave from the electrosmith, send it to the flip input here, and we'll send it the same CV as well, with the 1 volt per octave input right there. Now I have 3 oscillators, 2 of them modulating the generate 3. And back to FM again. And now that the pitch is no longer determined by the generate 3, it's actually changing timbre because I'm using the soft sync. I could send it like another modulation source to sort of move that timbre, which could be an LFO here from my sine bank. I'll send that to the exponential FM input and modulate it, attenuate it so it's more subtle. Don't make it slower. There you go. Now we have an evolving sort of timbre. Yeah, kind of gnarly. Now let's send the one I'm sending to heartsync. I'm going to send it to phase. So I'm modulating phase and frequency simultaneously with separate oscillators. Now, maybe if I send contour 1, just for fun, let's hear contour 1 resetting. And we'll take another output from filter 8 and amplitude modulate the fundamental. Alright, now let's listen to the core too. The core, remember, is not being phase modulated, but it is getting frequency modulated. Ha! Look at that. In low frequency mode. I don't really know what it's doing when I switch it to low frequency. I think it's just sort of combining the other oscillators I'm using. Let me do a quick sequence. Record. Alright. Let it rip. Now my hands are free to tweak away. Make it more simple. We'll remove the AM and we'll remove the phase modulation. interesting. Let's remove the AC switch and turn up the bias again. And that's the pure sound, right? And here as I slowly bring in frequency modulation. Nice. What a nice lead sound. This one will sound really nice through a filter. Well, how about we do that? Now we have one channel of just the fundamental wave, so we get that low note always happening. And now our combination of harmonic waves gets filtered by the vibrism by Patching Panda. Video coming soon. And the cool thing about this filter for this oscillator is that it's actually 3 bands. So I have the first band in low pass here, a middle band in band pass, the high band also in band pass, so that I could use it in high pass. And you can choose out of all of those amazing harmonics you're generating, you can pick 3 frequencies and emphasize them. And another thing you can do is send the same CV that's modulating the oscillators and send it to the filter as well. Oh, now we're really getting into some 80s digital synth kind of sounds. Let's send it some phase modulation again from this oscillator over here. And finally, let's give it an envelope. And again, another little cameo from another Patching Panda module here, the Punch. It's a dual VCA envelope generator for percussive sounds. And let me go back to without the harmonic waves, and let's play around a little bit. So I'm sweeping the 3 bands simultaneously, revealing different harmonics that are being generated by the generator 3. take the envelope out from the punch and send it to one of the bands here on the filter. See what happens. Alright, so that's it for now. I hope you liked the video. There's way more that you can do with the Generate 3. This is just what I could squeeze into this short video. If you like the module, go get it. It's available now from Joranalogue. And see you soon and stay noisy. I'm gonna keep on playing here.